Hey, Donald. So you are the guest on the Get It with Brad show. Nice to have you on here, buddy.
Good morning, Brad. How you doing?
Good. I met you a couple of weeks ago when I was on a business trip in Salt Lake City, and I knew just right away. I was like, I really want to have this guy on my podcast. We were at a bar in the hotel in Salt Lake City in the Hilton Resort, and I just knew right away because you have a really interesting story. You in 2016 got really sick, and then you had like a life-changing experience, and then instead of just dealing with the experience, you decided to fight back, right? And you created this awesome business out of it, and that's the kind of story that I want to talk about. So, can you tell me what happened in 2016 when you got really sick?
Well, the first week of January of 2016, I got sick. I initially went to the doctor. I thought I had bronchitis because I was susceptible to that. And, it got worse. By the next Monday, the second week of January, I drove to the emergency room. I had a buddy of mine drive me to the ER there in Castle Rock, Colorado. And I face planted in the emergency room. And that's the last thing that I remember. And I woke
Wow.
up in South Denver. I guess they transported me to South Denver. And when I woke up 11 days later in the ER, the ER doctor came in to talk to me. Dr. Berger come in, tell me that, I've been in a coma for 11 days,
Mm.
and I had swine flu, pneumonia, and ARDS all at the same time.
Wow.
And I was intubated. So, I had tubes down my throat. I was strapped to the bed. I couldn't move. And so for most of that day, I just kind of sat around and laid in bed and waited for nurses to come in to pull the tubes out of me and kind of set me up and get me moving because I've been, laying on my back for 11 days. And they did eventually. Once all that happened, I couldn't talk for 2 days because those tubes down my throat. But
Yeah.
a couple days later, they got me upstairs, into a bed in the hospital, and then that's where my recovery started. It is, I had to get my wind up. They wouldn't let me go home until I could keep my wind up by while walking. So
Wow.
the second day they got me up to get me walking, and I took 2 steps, my oxygen sats dropped down to 80 immediately. So like, oh no,
Dang.
you need to sit down. So it took 30 days, in the hospital to get to where I was strong enough to actually go home. And I went
Yeah.
home on oxygen. The doctor told me when he finally come in after the tubes are pulled out, and he told me, he says, hey, there's nothing that modern medicine can do with what you had. There's no vaccine, there's no shots, there's no pills that I can give you to, for pneumonia and ARDS and swine flu.
I
He
guess that makes
goes,
sense. Like whenever I've gotten pneumonia, I kind of just had to get better. Like
yeah,
I mean, like I guess my body just naturally got better. I was lucky. I was younger when I had
yeah.
it.
Well, and that's what he told me. He says, my job was to keep you alive long enough for your body to fight this.
Wow.
And for that 30 days, I thought about that all day long. I just thought about like, well, my body had to fight, these three deadly, lung injuries. And how did that happen? What did he mean by that? Because it didn't make sense to me. So I was at home for 6 months on home oxygen,
Yeah.
because I still wasn't moving very good. About 3 months into that, I started being able to get, walk around a little bit. I was still on oxygen, but after 6 months, the 6 months came up, and I went to my lung specialist to have him check me. They took X-rays, and he told me, he goes, well, you got scars in your lungs from pneumonia and the ARDS. He goes, there's nothing I can do. I can't give you anything to make you better. Where you're at is pretty much it. So whatever your energy level is or your
Dang.
ability, that's it. You're just have to accept it.
Were you able to
And,
walk around at that time or?
yeah, not much. And I'd walk 10, 15 feet. I'd have to sit down. I
Wow.
just the it just wasn't enough oxygen, I'd get lightheaded, so I'd have to sit down, and I was exhausted, So I told him, like, well, that's fine if that's what you think, but I don't accept that.
And
And
how did you? I read in your story when I was researching the last couple weeks for the interview that you had eventually you were able to actually hike in Castle Rock. What
yeah,
like, how did
yeah.
you go from not being able to walk 10 or 15 feet to and also you were reading thousands of research papers during this time too. Can you kind of walk me through your recovery and also like how you eventually started being able to walk around and then how you got in your mindset that hey, I want to do something. I want to not only help myself but help others.
Well, sat there and thought about it. I was like, well, in a doctor's mind is he has to give me a prescription. He has to give me something to make me better. I was like, I'm in Colorado. I mean, this is nothing but nature. So being in Castle Rock, there's a rock, it's a little mountain in Castle Rock. It's what it's named after. So there's a
Yeah.
little hiking trail there. So I drove over there, parked in the parking lot, and there's always a lot of people there, that are hiking all the time. So,
Yeah.
I got out, okay, I'm going to start this. So I started walking down the trail. I'd have to stop, maybe take a little break. I'd walk a little further down the trail, stop, take a break. And I did that for the first couple of weeks. I'd get maybe 50, 100 feet down the trail, and I'd have to walk back to my car and sleep for a couple hours. I was just exhausted.
Wow.
But it took me a couple months to be able to walk the whole trail and get to the base of Castle Rock, which
And
is it's a nice walk.
you'd always been an active person, right?
Yeah.
Can you just
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about just real briefly like what your life was like prior to 2016?
Well, I mean, outside of work, I mean, I've worked out my whole life. When I
Yeah.
got out of the service, I just fell into working out, and I've trained with professional athletes and professional bodybuilders and wrestlers. I trained with Sid Vicious and the Hawk and the Warriors. So I was into that when I was younger.
You
So
have a
I've
short sleeve
always,
shirt on right now, right? Can you show us your you got some muscles.
yeah, yeah. So
You do. I saw him and I was like, dang, you're still pretty fit.
Yeah, I love working out. It was, my whole day was to get to the gym. Everything that I ate during the day was so that I got benefits when I worked out. And I was been in construction my whole life, so
Yeah.
I started out, at 15 years old into underground in Brevard County, and the place to make money was NASA. So I get a job out at NASA doing underground and went to ironwork. So I started building launch towers and refurbishing them,
Wow.
and then because of that, was good at it, and
So prior to
started.
2016, you were already successful. You working out all the time physically. You're building. You were like a leader in the company building the launch towers, right?
Yeah,
Supervising
yeah,
guys and stuff like that. So
yeah,
you were already pretty successful at that time too.
yeah,
That's cool.
and then it progressed from there. I moved to Colorado, and same thing. Was familiar with ironwork, so I hired on with a company,
Yeah.
and then was a boss running it. I built the World Arena in Colorado Springs, which is an ice rink, and uh,
Wow.
and then just one day it just stopped. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna start my own company again. So I went back to doing work for myself, which I was a framing and drywall contractor in
Yeah.
Colorado, and it was booming. That at
That's
that
great.
time in '96, I mean, there was 5,000 people a month moving to Colorado, so there wasn't enough housing. So I got into to just massive building,
Well,
and built my company from there. And then the .com boom busted. Boom, everything just
yeah.
stopped, come
I
to a
remember
screeching
that.
halt. Yeah,
My
come to a
stock was
screeching
shooting.
halt. Yeah, So after that was what to do next. When I got when I healed myself, and it took a year in recovery. Once I did that, I was like, okay, I climbed to the top of Castle Rock, and then
Wow.
then I went to Red Rocks, which is North Colorado,
I was gonna say
which
it's
is
not the Iowa Red Rocks, right? Because I
no,
just got
it's
done
it's an
hiking there a while
amphitheater.
back.
It's an amphitheater, and the locals use it to work out. I mean, it's an amazing training place for running
Wow.
stairs, and yeah. So there's hundreds of people there every day. I mean, there's a bunch of trails around Red Rocks, but the amphitheater itself, so now I can make myself stronger, not just my lungs, my legs, my arms, so I started doing that, because for the last 7 months, the whole year I didn't work. So I literally slept in my car for 7 months while I was,
Wow.
recuperating, so now it was time I need to get back at it. I'm in a kind of a huge financial hole. So
Yeah.
to make a lot of money real fast, I went into oil and gas. That's
Yeah.
what I did next, which, oh my God, you can make so much money in that industry.
Oh, I
you
know.
know,
I was just sitting there next to a guy on a
oh
plane,
my
and he was
God,
a
you can
young
make,
guy. He didn't have a whole lot of education, honestly, but he was making a ton of money. I was like,
yeah.
well, that's great.
Yeah, you don't need to be highly educated to be into oil and gas and fracking. So, I started off because I've never done it before. I was just an operator, and 6 weeks later,
Wow.
I was running the project. So I
That's
was,
awesome, man.
yeah, so that my what I've always done my whole life in managing people and crews just kind of came out in that industry, which made me a ton of money. But at that point was I was looking towards retirement, so what do I need to do?
Yeah.
One, I got to pay all these bills that I acquired over a year of not working and being sick. Was I went to Belize,
Yeah.
to just to kind of relax for a week, and there was a lot of building going on in Belize at that time,
Really?
and I kind
Cool.
of got this idea that I would build a condo site. I'd sell it, keep one of them for myself. That's my retirement. You
Yeah.
know, so I started working on that, and I wanted to do it with renewables to create the energy because they have brownouts there all the time. So I started working on that, and I found out about algae. Um,
When you told
so
me about that, I thought that's really fascinating. I was like,
yeah,
I never knew algae could be protein and all kinds of stuff.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
It's amazing when I started understanding how potent algae is, blue green algae, Corella, astaxanthin. When I started learning about it, the one thing that was amazing to me is that I could understand the science. So when I
yeah.
had scientists explaining this to me, I could understand it, right? In which I don't think before I could have. I think what happened to me, in a coma kind of, changed things to where I am able to understand the science on how to grow, harvest algae.
Is that partly because you need to understand the science in order to strengthen your own body so you can live longer? Or did you just want to help other people because you
Yeah,
know
yeah,
what was
it went
happening to
along
someone?
that. One is the business side. I wanted a business
Yeah.
of it, and the
Yeah.
second side of that was I wanted to supply myself to create the product that I wanted to sell, so that I can
Yeah.
control the source
That makes a big
of
difference.
yeah. So that's what I did. So I spent years, working on that, and
And you read a lot of research papers too, right?
yes, the whole time I've been reading, from the time I got out of the hospital, years later, I'm reading, research on what does the body need to be healthy, and one thing kept running through my head for years was, well, what does being healthy look like?
Yeah,
Right?
I've
Can
wondered
can you
that
just
too.
yeah, can you just look at somebody and go, well, that person's healthy?
Because
Well,
you know some of those guys that are on steroids in the fitness magazines, they ain't healthy. I can tell that right off the
no,
bat.
well, and it's very high end athletes. When you actually start looking it up and see the ages of people that are Olympic athletes that are top at their game that die in their 40s and their 50s, especially men, which is heart attacks. You gotta ask the question. Why? When they have the money, they have the best nutritionists, they have trainers, they have all these people supporting them. Why do they die young? Why do they
Yeah.
have medical conditions? And the average day people, I was seeing, reels of, filming people that, ladies, I'm on the paleo diet. I've been on that for 20 years. I'm a triathlete. I run 4 marathons a year. I
Yeah.
run 5 to 10 miles a week. and they have to have a triple bypass.
Wow.
Yeah. And this one lady I know, she had a triple bypass. And then when she got out, same thing. She started doing research, and she comes down to, well, it's what what she thought was healthy. A paleo diet wasn't. She needed her minerals. She needed these other nutrients, and she started taking those nutrients. She actually went to a plant-based diet. And
Cool.
six
That's
months later,
good.
yeah, 6 months later, she did a follow-up visit with her doctor, and the bypass has been bypassed.
Dang. And
So
she
her
just
heart
did that
fixed
through like
itself. Yeah.
natural health then. And she
Yep.
didn't have to deal with a bunch of chemicals to do it. And
No, she didn't need that bypass,
yeah.
but for the doctors and surgeons, that's what they know. That they're not taught nutrition. They're, if
Right.
you have this, this, and this, I'm going to give you this pill. And then, 2 years from now, you're going to come back to me because your body's going to get used to this pill, and I'm going to have to give you another one to counter the side effects of this one. I mean, that's why they, if you look at CVS and Walgreens, you'll see these trays that have 10 slots in it for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Believe me, I see them a lot because I help people with Medicare, and a lot of my clients, that's what they've got. It's very sad, actually, but
Yeah.
it's just is what it is. But
Yeah, it is. I mean, before this, I believe my doctors. My family doctor, the man that held me when I was baby. I went to him religiously whenever I had something wrong with me, and didn't question anything that he told me. And now I'll never go to a general practitioner again, right? Because they have no clue of they don't find what's wrong with you, what
right.
caused this problem. And that's what all this research was telling me. And I started following homeopathic doctors, Dr. Wallach and 4 or 5 others that I found that their whole careers was to cure people, not to treat them, to cure them. So they found out, they literally would go to their house. What are you eating?
Yeah.
What toxins are in this house that could cause this side effect that you're getting, and they're eating this food and this food, they're drinking milk, and and they find out that you're deficient in vitamin D, you're deficient in zinc, you're
Hmm.
deficient in selenium, and they start giving them those minerals, and it goes away. Same thing with diabetes. I mean, the you look at the industry that's made so much money, on chemotherapy. Well, what feeds cancer? What does cancer? What's cancer's fuel? Right? Well, it's glucose.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Well, if you eliminate that, if you're not taking anything in, eating it, that fuels it will die. That I would think that would be common sense, but to them, they
yeah.
want to radiate you. And I've literally, it's scary when you actually unveil all the lies that we've been told. And that just pushed me more into, okay, well, my body needs all these minerals. It needs all 60 minerals. It needs vitamins. It needs omegas. How do I get that? So that pushed me to where, I can get a lot from the algae, but it's still missing some of these other things.
Interesting. And so is that where the idea for Omnia came from?
Yeah. Yeah. So initially I started buying pills, so vitamin D and zinc and
Yeah.
copper and selenium. I started buying pill. Well, it's
You see
25.
aisles of them at Walmart.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's like, do
Vitamin
I have to take all
shop
those
and
pills?
yeah, GNC, so I started buying them, and, and I was spending over $2,000 a month to get
Dang.
everything that I needed, that I've been reading. This is what my body needs. And then
Yeah.
I start coming across papers that, a lot of the pills that they don't get past your gut. So you just get rid of them. So
Well,
your
what
body's not
happens
really
there? Like,
using them.
so I swallow a pill, it goes into my gut, and why doesn't it go past my gut? Do I just
It's not
poop it
structured
out or
that way.
what? I mean, what?
Yeah, it's not
So it never
structured
it
way.
never goes to my actual body.
No, it doesn't get past your microbiome, and that's not all of them. Some of them are, but the majority is not. So okay, well then I don't like taking this many pills a day. That it started
Right.
becoming a problem. And then I started thinking about, okay, I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there don't want to, swallow 80 pills a day, 7 days a week to get everything that their body needs so that their organs are functioning correctly, their brain's functioning correctly, their muscles, their liver, everything's getting what it needs, all the raw materials.
I
So
sure
that's
don't
what
want to
I,
swallow that many pills a day. Were
yeah,
you actually getting better taking $2,000 a month worth of vitamins? I mean, was that helping you?
in somewhat, because some of it was getting through.
Yeah.
I noticed
Okay,
small
that makes sense.
improvements. And that's the biggest thing. When I was coming up with Omnia, was that people they want to feel something like immediately. Well, they want this euphoric feeling.
Heck
You
yeah.
know,
That's why
they
those bad drugs are so
yeah,
popular. That's why people love them.
when I drink 5 beers, I can feel that
Me
I'm getting
too.
drunk. They want some euphoric feeling. Well, taking, all your vitamins and minerals in a day, right? It's not a euphoric feeling that you're going to feel, is that the inside is working correctly. You have all the raw materials in your body daily, which is micronutrients that's helping it function correctly, so that you have a waste system in your body. So if you don't get rid of the waste, it builds up.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. With people's brains is your nerve. Drinking beer as a kid is like, let's go kill brain cells. Well, that's not a good thing, right?
No, if that's what I thought about, I'd probably turn around and drive back home. I wouldn't go to the bar.
Yeah.
But I'm not
So
thinking about that. I'm thinking about, oh, who am I going to meet there? What am I
yeah,
going to play pool there?
But when you kill those brain cells, if your body waste system is not working correctly to to flush it out, then the dead cells are on live cells, and they kill dead cells. So
Mm,
it just gets be exponential. And if you have years and years and years of that, and that's why you see, you don't have kids that have, diabetes and heart disease and all this other things. It's, late 30s, early 40s, people start feeling these things to where they got to go to the doctor. I'm not feeling good. And they go to the doctor. They got brain fog. They don't
yeah.
have the energy they used to have. And the doctor's like, oh, well, your LDLs and your HDLs, and you're taking too much cholesterol. I was like, no, most of your brain is made up cholesterol. You need cholesterol. It's like
Which is
sodium.
This is so cool, Don. You are what we've just talked about, a construction guy, a builder by trade, and then, but I can see the way you're talking now. You're basically an absolute expert at this stuff. This is really
Well,
cool.
I learned a lot because I wanted to understand, because I don't want to go to the hospital again. I don't like hospitals. And that
Yeah, I
was
don't either.
a horrendous year. I mean, I lost 30 pounds in 11 days. That's the weakest I've ever been in my life. And I don't like having to be helped with just walking. I was so weak from that. And I thought about, all these other people that possibly, you know, are going to have these issues because they don't know that, the food that you're eating is not giving you what you need anymore. 40 years ago, we got the nutrients because we're still in the soil. Now it's not. That you get very little in there. 85% of the population is vitamin D deficient.
Hmm.
Most people are going to sit in their house. Kids are going to be on their phones in the house playing video. They're not outside playing, and there's only a certain time of the day your body actually will absorb the vitamin D so they can use it. So most homeopathic doctors, not all of them, are going to tell you you have to supplement with vitamin D. So I made sure that was in Omnia, which was vitamin D. And then you can't just take one mineral and not take others. They work in combinations, you
Okay,
know.
that makes sense.
Yeah, you can't just take magnesium and calcium. They work together. Vitamins, you just can't take 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C and your
That's
body's
what I
going to
was
use
thinking
it.
about when you said that. I was thinking everyone says vitamin C, vitamin C, vitamin C. Well, I can't imagine how that can alone can do everything I need.
Yeah, you need other minerals that help it, that breaks it apart. I mean, that's just part of the science and the bio of it. But if what you're taking doesn't get past your gut, then your body doesn't use it. You just pee it out.
So how did you go from seeing this that a lot of the stuff that people are taking are not getting through your gut, and you know that people need a simple way to consume all these different nutrients, to now you've got this finished product that's amazing that you have manufactured, and and I'm sure you probably had to raise some money to get to this point. How did you get to where now you're working with a world-renowned chemist? I mean, how does that happen?
Well, just like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
is I had to do it. One, I need, want to know the process and the steps so that I understand it. So, you know, I had made some contacts, with the algae, when I started growing algae. So I had some distributors around the country that wanted to sell it as a whole, as a protein. So I
Because you,
contacted
you you
them.
initially started an algae farm then, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
just want to
I
make sure
started growing.
our
Yeah.
listeners can see the progression. So you initially started your own algae farm in, what was it, Virginia?
No, it was in South Florida.
Okay, South
I
Florida.
bought 10 acres down there, and I
And can
built
you
my
explain
own.
the algae part of it? It's because algae is really important to the or to the nutrients. You found that out, and you thought there's a market opportunity for the algae at
Yeah,
that time,
yeah.
right?
So
That's why
so
you
the
started the
first
farm.
initial was spirulina, which is blue green algae. It
Yeah.
has a very high protein content in it, and a lot of amazing properties to it. And the second one was chlorella, and
Wow.
chlorella has less protein, about 42% it'll grow at, but it has the other side of that coin. It has other properties that spirulina doesn't have, so they kind of work together. And then astaxanthin, which is it turns red. The way to think of this, it grows green, and the scientific name of it, and I can't remember right now what it is, but it's a very hard algae to grow. But what it does
Really?
is think of this as a bird feeder. So you see a little porcelain, stand up independent bird feeder in your backyard, and you got water in
Hmm.
it for the birds to land and drink the water. So if you have, you know, astaxanthin, and growing in there in green, and then the sun dried up the water to where there's no more water, there's no more nutrients for the algae to eat, it will turn red to protect its DNA, right?
Wow.
So shrimp turn, so flamingos are white, so they turn pink when they eat astaxanthin,
Jeez.
right? So
Because
so
it once turns red to protect itself.
to protect itself. It
So the
protects
flamingos
it could
can't
set
consume it.
it could set there dormant in that pond for years before it fills up with water, and then it'll go back to growing green, right? So it's a very amazing algae. So I mean, there's like 30,000 species of algae. We as humans we only use six.
So at this time, when did you have the algae farm? But because then you initially got all this illness started in 2016, and then but when did you have the algae farm at this time?
All the way up until 2021.
Okay.
So it took me a couple years to build it out. I
Yeah.
built a lab there. I did the science in. I built out a drying facility. I built out a harvesting. I built, the largest indoor reactors on this planet on this 10 acres.
Wow.
And so I was growing all three algae and working with scientists on that, make sure I was doing it correctly.
And your
And
goal
then
was to sell the algae, right?
yeah, yeah.
Be in
Well,
the
and
algae
plus,
business.
yeah, and plus that to put
Your
it.
goal at that time was not Omnia, because that hadn't been invented yet. But your goal was the algae business, right?
Yeah, well, I could sell it as a plant-based protein.
Okay.
The blue-green algae, the chlorella. I actually got in touch with some University of Florida because they're a big ag school, and I read a paper from MIT. They did a study with algae, feeding it to cattle, and it reduced their methane output. So at that time there was this big mandate across the country to reduce the methane. You
I bet
know,
the neighbors of the people that have the cattle were happy to
yeah,
reduce
yeah.
that output too.
So
I
and
hate to
I had
farms to
cows
get
on my
things to high
property.
heaven.
Yeah. So I contacted some professors at the University of Florida, and a couple of them responded, and one of them specifically, I drove up, spent a day at the lab, and they had a whole herd of cattle that they had medical on all of them, and that's their herd for the college,
Yeah.
and their PhD graduates work out of that lab. They do their thesis and then they study, and they have a mandate to come up with some type of feed that would replace corn because there's 10 ethanol plants went down, closed that year. So that was all the leftovers from the ethanol plant went to fill to feed cattle, right? Plus they
Wow.
had a mandate that cows, with their burping and farting is, all this methane from cows. So how can they feed them and reduce the methane that they're putting out?
Yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting. And this MIC study showed that. So I sent that study to him and he goes, this is interesting. I'm really curious about this. So it's like, listen, I can send you my Corella and you could do a study. And
Yeah.
he did. He tasked a PhD candidate. He was out in Argentina, a young kid. And what he did is he took one of their cows, which has this surgically input this stainless steel cylinder into its side, so
Dang.
they can dip in and take the out of their, they got four stomachs, so they would take their what's out of the stomach instead of
Neat.
feeding the cattle because they don't want to kill their cow, so they want to
In a
test it
row.
first. Yeah, so he filmed it. So he took pictures of him taking it out of the cow number 273.
Yeah.
Here's the medical history of this cow,
Yeah.
and he did a study with that, and it took him a
With
couple
the algae,
months.
right?
Yeah,
So,
with
okay.
Corella, and then they did a presentation to me, a PowerPoint, and he actually did his thesis on this, and
Cool.
the cattle would assimilate 85% of the Corella, right?
Wow.
And the professor is like, this is kind of unheard of. That he goes, just to let you know that when cows can assimilate in that high percentage of the food that they're eating, every time their methane output is through the roof because they're able to use all of everything that's in that. He
So,
goes,
like,
but if you
if they ate a bunch of corn, then the methane's just
Oh, the
throughout.
methane's through the roof. Yeah.
Okay.
So he had a chart and he goes, see right here, down here at the bottom, that's almost at zero. He goes, that's their methane output from Corella. He goes, this is unheard of.
And I bet
And
that light bulb went off in your mind.
oh yeah,
Business
yeah,
idea,
yeah,
the multi-billion-dollar industry of cows, and if I can radically change it and help it, shoot,
yeah.
sky's
Well,
the limit.
and as well as the spirulina.
Yeah.
I had purchase orders for my spirulina. So now it was, I needed to raise a lot of money to be able to commercialize, build it in big scale, which I had it
Yeah.
all planned out for a big scale. And I spent years, sitting down with investors. I sat down with professional athletes that were retired that had money, and everybody. I mean,
Wow.
if I had an app for a phone, they would have wrote a check. I tend to realize, quite quickly that people invest in something that they're comfortable in.
Yeah.
If they made their money in real estate, they understand it, and they're not going to take a risk to put money in boater charting or something.
That makes
They
sense.
stay with it. Yeah. So I have to find somebody that's in aquaculture, which is a needle in a haystack of needles. So after a while, just beat my head against the wall. I was growing it. I was doing the science and have all the feed and just sitting in my house one night. I just like, well, I'm just going to come out with a product that I can start taking instead of drinking all these pills that has this in there. I
Yeah.
just make sure that my manufacturer and my chemist, that the source that they get the algae from and all the ingredients is a clean source. And
Yeah.
that's a good word that I come up with in a lot of my sitting down with investors was I want a clean product. No heavy metals, no pesticides, non-GMO, and so it has to be tested, right? Which I found labs, Eurofins one of them, and they'll test whatever you tell them to. I want to test for this, and this.
So you
And
independently tested. You figured out who
yeah,
you want to buy the algae from in large quantities, and then you independently tested it.
yeah. They have to send in a C of A, a certificate of analysis with every ingredient. I mean, it's an FDA requirement, but you can ask for what specific things that you want. Like blue green algae, what's the protein content? They'll tell you protein content on that C of A, I had mine tested. It was 66.7, I think. It was the highest protein content on the planet.
Wow.
So now, was I made these phone calls. I found the manufacturer and set a meeting, and they were very gracious. They took on my company, even though it was a new company, as a
Wow.
client.
Are you
And
able to say who the manufacturer is?
Professional Botanicals. They're out of Utah, and that's
Okay.
why I was in Utah, because I'm gonna revise my formula. I want to make it better.
Wow.
But they had a good friend of theirs, which is my chemist. Been in the industry 40 plus years. He's built and sold multiple companies, for that type of industry. He's just an amazing guy. And
Can
so
you
I
say
said,
who that is?
I flew into town and sat down with
Yeah.
him and said, I want to build this, and his first words out of his mouth, he goes, well, we got to make sure it gets past the gut. That was the first
Because
words out of his
everything you
mouth.
were telling me that a lot of
Yeah.
things don't get to past the gut,
Yeah.
right?
And so, specific things. I want this, and that, because I went out into the market, because there's a lot of other products out there that's similar. So, what's out there now that, has everything in it that, you can drink. And I bought some of them, tried them, most of them were real gritty and,
Mhm.
and tasted horrible.
That's what I
Um,
haven't liked about plant-based, completely plant-based nutrients. If they take out the whey and they take out that stuff, and then it doesn't taste as good.
Yeah, it did, I didn't like it. So I'm like, okay, I don't like this. I can come up with something better than this.
Yeah.
And it took a while. It took a long time. It took 6 months to a year of putting a formula together, him blending it for me, and then shipping it to me. And then I would do taste tests. So I'm working out in the gym. I would go to the manager, owner of the gym, and they usually have classes, that are in the gym,
Oh, for
15 to
sure.
20. Yeah. So I'm like, hey, would you guys mind trying this after your class? And
Wow.
all of them were like, absolutely. And the first test I had was, I mean, it was between 16 and a 65-year-old woman. So I had a wide range
That is
of
so
women and men.
cool.
Yeah. And so I did a blind taste test. So I took a couple of my competitors and I mixed it, and I had a 20 questionnaire for them that my chemist gave me. So we need to check for color, flavor,
This is
if there's an
neat.
aftertaste, how does it look, all these things that that I'd ask them. So they tried my competitor, all of them tried it.
Yeah.
They told me what they thought about it. Like, okay, well, try this one. I didn't tell them it was mine. I said, just try this one. I gave them that one. They're like, oh, their face lit up. Like, man, this is good. I said,
How
what
did
do you
that make
think
you
about it?
feel to know that
Oh yeah, it
I would
made
feel
me.
like I hit the jackpot. I got it.
Yeah, it made me feel real good. I mean, the youngest girl, she asked me point blank. She goes, "Do I have to mix it in 6 ounces of water?" I'm like, "No." She goes, "I'd like to mix it in just a little bit, just do a shot in the morning for it, so because I got to go." I'm like,
Yeah.
"You can take it
Me
however
too.
you want to take it. You don't need 6 ounces of water. That's just what's recommended. If you want to just put enough in there that mixes it and you just shoot it, fine. You're going to get all the vitamins and minerals and superfoods and adaptogens. I mean, in that's in this, you're going to get it in that shot. It doesn't need to have a bunch of fluid because you're going to drink water throughout the day." She goes, "Fantastic." She goes, "I love it." So that was my first taste test of it, which I revised it over the next 6 months and kept doing taste tests with multiple groups of people, and it was all blind taste tests. I didn't tell them what was mine or what was other companies,
Wow.
and everybody liked mine better.
I love
So
that.
yeah, I knew I was on the right track. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, it's green, because most people when they see green, they get this what's called the ick factor. Like, oh, it's gonna taste horrible. It's green. You
Right.
know, so like, okay, how do I get past that? And most of the products on the market they're just one flavor. It's just the base flavor. I'm like, well, I want to have flavors. I want to give people a variety, but it's got to be a good flavor. So I went
Hmm.
back to my chemist and said, hey, I want to come out with some flavors. And he just perked up. He goes, oh my God. He goes, you got to try this watermelon that we just got in. He goes, I don't like
Cool.
watermelon, and this watermelon is the best watermelon. I said, all right, I'll be on a plane. So I jump on a plane, I fly to Utah, we sat down and did taste tests, and he's like a sommelier when it comes to flavors and ingredients. His expertise is vitamins and minerals. Lucky me, right?
Yeah.
But his taste buds on how he can change things, and he knows what's in it. And he goes, nah, I think
Wow.
we need to back down on this and include this so that this flavor comes out. So, that's how I come up with the flavors, which, is watermelon, orange cream. The original tastes like berry, and then coffee. Coffee, I was thinking, because I saw, all the women doing their iced coffees in the morning at
Oh
Starbucks.
yeah, for
It's like,
sure.
I was like, this would be great, down the road to where they could just put a scoop in their coffee. It doesn't
Yeah.
change. It's already coffee flavor, but they're drinking their iced coffee in the morning and getting their vitamins and minerals at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I just think it's so cool to see how you've progressed from being in the construction industry to becoming having this thing knocked you on your butt, and then now you're an expert in a whole different industry, and you've raised money and you build a product and everything.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you not just that you've sold yourself, but you've also sold top chemists and top investors to be working with you to get to this point. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been quite an adventure. I mean, once I created it, I started taking it, obviously. So,
Yeah,
I changed industries and I started working in a very niche market, ADA compliance in hospitals. So, last 7 years, I've been working in hospitals,
yeah,
and I don't, and hospitals is where sick people go, right?
yeah.
I don't get sick. I'm
Wow.
in elevators with people that are, I mean, touching buttons. And it's because I contribute that is that I'm getting all the raw materials my body needs for my immune system to be strong, to be able to fight anything that comes in. I mean, every once in a while, with allergies or something, my sinuses get messed up, but that's it. It's, I've not had a day off since. Everybody that works for me that's not, drinking my drink, they get sick.
Yeah.
And my engineers got a kid, so kids are always, they're always touching things and the snows, and they bring the cold home to their parents, and their parents get sick. Well, he would come into the office and he's be sick. He's touching the same things I'm touching. I wouldn't get sick.
And then this is because you take the Omnia scoops every
I
day.
that's what I attribute it to, because I'm getting everything every day, right? So when you look at in the research that I've done, when you come down to all the marketing that we've been bombarded with for 30 years, flu and cold season, you need to go get your flu shot, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to get a cold. Well, no, it's one, you're already not getting vitamin D because you're not out in the sun. But now it's turning cold to where people are in jackets. You're getting none, because it's cold outside. So you're all bundled up. You go from your office to the car to home, and you stay in the house, right? You're getting no sun whatsoever, So that's attributing to people getting colds. Why do they get a cold at only this time of the year? It didn't make sense to me, and it's one thing I've had my whole life is I like to think I got common sense. Ask a question. Why? Why do these things happen? You know, and you see that there's always these commercials play to solve it,
Right.
or to mimic it. I mean, there was an article that came out, was it like last month, that one of the big pharma companies admitted that all the Claritin and Dayquil, none of it works.
Whoa.
They admitted it. That again, people's attention spans are very short, right?
Yo, for
But
sure.
if you just look at that, I mean the oldest big pharma I think it's Merck. It's a German company. They've been around 100 and something years. They have not cured one person. You think about that.
But
If
you're right.
common
Come to
sense,
think of it, none of the drugs I've ever taken have actually, unless it's been like the common cold, which would have got better anyway, probably. But
yes,
I
your
mean,
body's going
but
to get
for
better.
major things, like to be honest, I always want to be honest with my or not honest, but just open with my podcast listeners. But I take a medicine for anxiety, and I've ever since I've started taking it, I still have anxiety. But yes, it does help a little bit, but it's not cured me. So
Yeah, I mean, none of them, and I'll give an example. My sister, my older sister, I had to leave Colorado to come back to Florida because my mom was having lung surgery. And so she called me on Fridays, hey, mom's having surgery on Monday. I think you ought to be here. Well, it would have been nicer if you gave me a bigger heads up. So I get on a plane, fly into Florida, and she has her lung surgery. And because she was late 70s at that time. So,
mhm.
good chance she wasn't going to live through it. And that week, my older sister has a heart attack.
Oh wow.
And so she actually drove herself to the hospital, and they transferred her to Orlando to an actual heart center. Well, she stayed in there for 30 days because she's at some point in her life she's going to have a heart transplant. So they have to test you to make sure that your body's not going to reject the one they put in before they put the real one,
Yeah.
and find out she has diabetes. So if they put her on this special diet, well, you know,
I'm sorry,
yeah, well,
Donald.
once she goes home, right? I'm like, well, I need to help my sister. So I flew home and I slept on the couch. So for the next 6 months, as soon as I heard her feet hit the ground, I jumped up, I prepared her breakfast, I fed her, we tested her to make sure that, everything is not spiking, and her blood pressure and everything's working. Because she
Dude,
had,
that's awesome to do that for your sister.
yeah, yeah. Well, that kind of started me down this path of working in the hospital, is
Yeah.
because my nephews weren't going to do it, and her husband wasn't going to do it. They just don't see her as being not capable. But she couldn't get up and walk to the kitchen sink to do dishes. She'd have to go
Mhm.
nap for 2 hours. So I understood that her insides is damaged because I had mine, right? So I understood where she was at. She was going to need help, so I was going to do that. And just the other day, so she's retired. She cannot work. I mean,
Yeah.
she part of her heart is dead, right? She has 12
Jeez.
stents in her heart, right? So she can't work. So she had to sue, Social Security to get her Social Security. But
I've heard that's common now.
oh my God, ridiculous.
They try
But
and mess with people.
2 or 3 weeks ago, I flew into Florida, went and saw my sister, and she told me that. She goes, yeah, she goes, last week I went to the emergency room. I'm like, why did you go to the emergency room? She goes, well, I felt like I was having a heart attack. And I said, well, what did they find out? She said, well, they had this, and this. I'm like, okay, well, did you ask them what caused it? She goes, I did. She goes, she's listening to me. So she asked them, what could cause this? And
Mhm.
one of them was an infection. And the week earlier, she had an infection, right? She goes, that probably
Wow.
caused it. She goes, but these pills that I'm taking are, you know, they're giving her side effects. And I'm like, well, what are you taking the pills for? She goes, well, for my blood pressure. I'm like, why are you taking, a synthetic? I mean, this stuff is bad for you.
Yeah.
And I told her an organic to take. I said, take cayenne pepper. And she
So cool. You know how to do
yeah,
that.
yeah. So and she started on it in a pill form, an organic pill form, off her pills. She hasn't
Really?
taken them. She hasn't taken them
Just from
since.
cayenne pepper?
Yeah, she checks her.
Was she also taking your Omnia?
Yeah, yeah, but
Ooh.
with the cayenne pepper, it specifically, does that. It again, the properties of it is amazing, and you can't OD on it. But one of the doctors that I follow had, in one of his podcasts or one of his, TED talk, that's what he talked about, and I'm like, well, it's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Why don't you try this and see if it's going to be beneficial for you, and because a doctor's never going to say that because they can't make money off of it, and they
Right.
don't know nothing about it. You
So,
know,
John, when you actually got the Omnia manufactured, you got it all done with your chemist and all ready to go to market. You could have the best product in the world, but like you got to find someone to buy it. Like, how do you market Omnia?
Well, and yeah, that's a good point. So now I got to learn e-commerce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting it on the shelf right out of the gate is very difficult.
Well, I'm
I
sure.
did some
'Cause
research
I
on
just
it.
was in my health food store yesterday, and there's like aisles and aisles and aisles of that stuff. And
Yeah.
yours could be, and I'm sure it is better than the other ones. But then, like, how do you like? Well, somebody told me this one time. What's the most successful restaurant in the world? And I got to thinking about it, and they're like, "Yeah, you're right. It's McDonald's. Are they really the best restaurant? Heck, no, they're
No.
not.
No.
But they've got marketing down. So, like, I mean, how do you bring out yours and get yours into people's kitchens?
Well, same thing with researching my ingredients and the sources and stuff is now I got to do research, and I was
Yeah,
doing it. I was doing it while I was taste testing. So,
yeah.
and all of it's being, I'm sourcing a pouch manufacturer, box, stainless steel canister, shaker cups. I'm getting samples sent to
Whoa,
me. So, because I have to create this, so I'm
that's
getting
so
samples
cool.
and doing sizes and having people look at it and getting feedback from people. At the same time was okay, well, how do you market online? You
Yeah,
know, and initially I hired a couple marketing companies, which I ended up firing. That they just check boxes. So lesson learned. I
yeah,
paid for my education. That
yeah,
these companies are not there to create sales. They're just there to check boxes and make their
yeah.
company money, right?
Right.
But it's really not, you're not hitting what needs to be. There's very specific stuffs to do. So actually, January of this year, December of last year, my manufacturer, turned me on to their guy that built their Amazon store, and
Wow.
so I contacted him. So now I've built a team that specializes in all these things. How to run ads, the algorithms. We're tracking things on the back end. We're using AI,
That's cool.
for email, targeting to send out emails to people on a regular basis, when we have discounts, when we have promotions, so all that started, January of this year, so that I can get this to more people and help more people, and quite frankly, the company that I work for, that's paying for all this because I'm bootstrapping it, to
Yeah.
some point, is my vice president is drinking it, his wife is drinking it, my
Really?
project manager is drinking it, I got
Wow.
engineers, yeah. So, and the feedback from them, like my vice president is, he's about my age, and he just had a heart attack over a year ago, and he told me point blank, he says, I gotta have it. He goes, I've gone to work when I didn't take it one time. I didn't have the energy. I wasn't, I wasn't focusing. He says, I have to have this. So, thank you. It's really improved my ability to go to work and be energetic. So him and his wife take it religiously now.
Is he the vice president of the hospital company you work
No,
for?
the contractor that I work for has been in business 75 years. So he's the vice president of our division. He's actually a part owner
Wow.
in the company.
That's
It's
awesome,
a
man.
multi-billion-dollar company. So,
Dang.
he's a smart guy. He's the nicest guy in the world. But he he,
And
he
how
came to
does it
my
make you feel to see people that you respect and know and work with every day loving your product? I bet it feels
uh,
amazing.
yeah, it does. What I like more about it is that it's helping them.
Yeah.
That they're actually benefiting from this, and they're noticing the benefits. They're realizing that I do need this every day because it's helping my body function correctly. No
Yeah.
matter what you're eating in the day, but if you still get this every morning, your body's able to function. And if it does get attacked with something, it's able to fight it off because those raw materials are there for your body to fight it off. Because if you don't have that, then your body's defenses eventually just break down.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now, like, what do you see as the future of Omni? Like, where do you want to be in 5 years from now?
Well, I've got a couple other uh, products that I'm gonna come out with and put under the brand that, that I've
Cool.
seen a need for, especially in the construction industry. Summertime's very hot, and you can't just drink water. A lot of my research realized that you can't just drink water. You need salt with it. You need, electrolytes for your body to actually absorb the water. So the construction industry uses a lot of electrolytes, and my company specifically, it's a safety thing.
Yeah.
They want people to be safety first. So, I've got an electrolyte I'm coming out with. I'm revising my formula for Omnia, because I found to increase some of the levels of some of the minerals is very beneficial for women specifically, but also men. So I'm increasing those levels, so that they get more benefits from it. And then down the
Wow.
road, I wanna come out with a vitamin and mineral for dogs. I'm a big animal lover, so
Me too.
yeah. So same thing with dogs, is anything in the animal kingdom, is they only eat what we give them, and most dog food's processed.
What's the name of your dog? Tell me about your dog.
Well, yeah, I've had several of them. I had Akitas and Chow Chows.
Really?
They
Aw.
yeah, they've all lived their lifespan, so they're and passed away because of their age. They all lived to 14, 15 years old.
That's my
You
little
know,
dog over there. He's Buddy. You see him on the table over there, and
yeah,
he's about 12 now. And I can totally understand when he passes. Now that my business has gotten so busy, I probably won't get another dog right away because it's a huge responsibility. My dad's probably over there right now. He goes over there every lunch hour, and bless his heart,
yeah.
to let Buddy out. But yeah, they are a nice thing to have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're when you think of dogs specifically, I mean, no matter how long you're gone, when you come back home, they're always happy to
Yeah,
see you.
they
And
sure are.
we need that. I mean,
Yeah,
we're walking energy, so to get that positive energy from that animal, just it'll automatically perk you up. So and just like you, I mean, I've been so busy with the company and work
yeah.
that I can't give the animal the time that I'd want to. So once this gets to a size, I'll get another. I want to get an Akita, I think, and
Cool.
have a pet, to gallivant around the country with me. But that's kind of where I want to go next, is come out with a multivitamin and mineral drink or a pill form for dogs, as well as horses.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've talked to several vets that actually use a competitor of mine. They actually sprinkle it on their food, to get, because
Interesting.
again, is if you look at the animal kingdom, why do horses chew on fences? You know what? Why
I don't know. What?
they're trying to get minerals.
Oh, they're not just trying to get out?
No, no. Well, in the cattle industry, right? They have, it's called a mineral lick.
Yeah.
Right. So it comes in a big tub and you just set it out in the middle of the field. It's got molasses in it and all this other stuff, but it's for them to go get their minerals. They got to lick it to get their minerals.
Wow.
Right. So they have that made for the cattle industry. Anybody that has cattle has that, but for horses and stuff like that, there's just like dogs. I mean, people that have horses spend a lot of money on their horses, and they would want them to be as healthy as they possibly can be.
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
I see that as something I've got on my list to do. When I was doing
Good.
algae, and I actually got asked to go to the UN, so I flew out there and met with the gentleman in the United Nations, because
That's
of
so
what
cool. Where
yeah,
did you fly to meet with them?
I went to Geneva, and
Wow.
yeah, and
That's one of the
I
top places for United Nations, I think,
yeah,
ain't it?
yeah. So I went to and sat down, spent the day with a gentleman named Al, and went over the algae and what I want to do with it, and and his conclusion at the end of the day, and he's been in that field for 30 years. He was a very polished politician, and he told me point blank. He says, what you got, can change the planet. You can help a lot of people. He says
Dang.
once you're ready and you want to go to other countries, I have his attorney on my phone. He goes, you call
Oh,
my, and he told the attorney, he's like, hey, when Donald calls you, he goes, I'll open up all 192 countries to you. I got all of them on my phone, because he works in all those countries with his nonprofit. He helps people. He's got the most respected NGO on the planet,
Well,
and
that would
he
help like so much for your business and be
yeah.
incredible.
Well, I got to get to a point to where I can provide that, in a larger scale. I want to get it into the military. Being a
Oh
former
yeah.
Marine, as a Marine, that when you're out on operations or either in training, and you're eating MREs, to have something like this that you can drink that'll give you all the vitamins and nutrients that you need,
Oh yeah, that'd be
then
great
you're
for
able
us
to perform
soldiers.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get it into that, as a military application, which that takes time as well. That's a process, but I'll get there at some point.
I love that, Donald. Well, I think we've kind of covered the story of Omnia, which is what I wanted to tell after I met you in at that hotel a couple weeks ago at the bar there and just having a little drink. And I'm glad we're able to tell that story. And is there anything else you want to tell us or not? Or
No, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast,
oh,
and
well, thank
it
you.
was great talking to you at the restaurant. I love talking about
Yeah,
my company, and I think I've wanted to get my story out there. I've got it posted on my website, but
I know.
you
I
know,
watched that right away. That
yeah.
very night I watched that and I loved it.
Yeah, I can just envision so many people out there that have a struggle or an issue in their life that they're feeling beat up, and like, if my story can inspire them, it's like, just start, just the next day, just start. Don't put it off. Don't be complacent. Don't, just start. It can get better. It's completely up to you. Nobody else, it's up to you. If you want something better, if you want to change, you can do it. It's completely up to do. The only
So
thing
that's
that's holding you
for
back
health
is you.
or for business or for everything?
Anything. You want to be a healthier person, change.
Yeah.
It's all up in here. When I was trying to recoup and walking down those trails, everything that was popping through my head was all my drill instructors. That their job is to push you, past your limits. Let's see what you can take. The Marine Corps boot camp, I started out with 85 guys in boot camp. I graduated with 31. The other 50 guys
Man.
left, right? So
They
so
quit?
just to get through boot camp, I watched 4 guys die in boot camp. They push you because they want the best. Back in the 80s, that's what it was. Is that it they are taught this is the way it is. It's not just taking orders, is that they're pushing you to break you and to push you past your limits, and you realize I can do it,
Yeah.
right? If I would have thought in my head I can't do this, I've defeated myself right there. I've just eliminated the possibility of me accomplishing anything, because in my mind I just said I can't do it. You know?
I love what you're saying. It was actually 2.5 years ago that I just started or decided to start a podcast, and I finally did it a couple weeks ago. I had my first interview. You're my second interview. So, and unfortunately, just a lot of people just think about things forever, and at least
Yeah.
I'm doing it now.
It's making a decision and just doing it. Don't it's got to be the perfect time. I got to wait for this. No, that's an
Well, I
excuse.
didn't do it because, as you can see even in this interview, this is not Joe Rogan's studio. You know what I mean? We're doing good, but
Yeah.
I'm not that. I don't like learning and getting better. I'd like to just already be there.
Yeah, but you don't need all that. I
Yeah,
mean, that's when you get to that level, but you don't need all that to
yeah,
make it happen.
yeah,
You need this. This technology is here. You don't need to spend a bunch of money,
yeah,
but you got to put it out there, and you got to put you out there, and that's what my story was. Is I am not going to accept what a doctor is telling me. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'm capable of. I
yeah,
do, because I've been pushed to my limit by guys that are trained to push you to your limit. You know,
yeah,
and anybody that's been in the military, that's been in these units, right? You're tested, you're pushed, so that that I thought my limit was here, but no, I went to here. It's all in your head. What are you willing to take? And it comes back to, I relived all the way back 30 years ago when this multimillionaire told me there's this big pile of crap in you, with everything that you want to accomplish on the other side of it, and you got to go through it. So that's dealing with pain. That's dealing with, while I was creating this, I worked 7 days a week for 3.5 years. I didn't take
Dang.
Christmas. I didn't go to New Year's. I didn't go have birthdays. I took no time off.
In order to create Omnia?
Yeah, I was growing the algae. I was learning the science. I was prepping for building this and growing this. I did nothing else. I didn't date anybody. I I cooked at home. I mean, I literally from the time I woke up in the morning until late that night, from dark to dark, I did nothing but this so that I could come out with something that it will help people. That was my initial intent.
I
And then on the
love that.
marketing side, we talked about the marketing side is, I met a guy and the first thing he says is great to be the best product on the market, but if nobody knows about you, then you can't help anybody.
Yeah, like it was at a marketing or sales conference I went to too, and that's where I heard that McDonald's analogy. That the speaker said, "What's the biggest, most successful restaurant chain in the world?" And I thought to myself, "Well, it's McDonald's." And he says, "Do you like going to McDonald's?" I said, "Well, not really. It's not the best, but it doesn't real. That's not the most important thing when it comes to being successful. Is
No,
if you're the highest quality,
it's
you
being the
got to be the
best
best
known,
market."
right? So it's being the best known. So I tell my
Yeah,
marketing, all my team, I tell my team, it's like, well, we need to be the best known, right? We need, and that's being out there. That's putting out their ads and content so people, the algorithms kick in so that more people see this product, so then they can try it, you know, and hopefully read on the site, about the ingredients, the adaptogens on how it affects the body and all these minerals that you body, and realizing I need this every day. You're not going to have this euphoric feeling. You just know in your head that my body is getting everything it needs to function correctly, and hopefully it's going to give you a long life, right? Because you're taking what your body needs every day to fight whatever comes along. I mean, when you get a cut on your finger, you don't rush to the doctor and he puts some special salve on it to heal it. No, your
yeah,
body heals it, right?
yeah,
Well, how does your body heal that cut? It's the raw materials in your body, the white blood cell. I mean, all that needs fuel, you know, and everybody thinks of that as food, right? Well, yeah. Well, if your food doesn't have any vitamins and nutrients in it no more, then all you're eating is protein and calories, you know. So that means you have to supplement to get what you need to function daily, not just every once in a while, every day, 7 days a week. So that kind of it is always in my head is I wake up and drive to, what else can I do to get this out there, get more aware, to get people to understand, they need minerals, they need vitamins, they need chlorophyll. That's why it's green. It's chlorophyll. Your
yeah.
body needs these things, you know, um, and hopefully they I think they're starting to realize, that the technology is, if you think back 30 years ago, the only way you can get information, you get it from your doctor.
Right,
Who's going to go to the library and start pulling up, medical journals and start reading stuff? So
right.
you had to trust your doctor and believe that what
Yeah,
he tells you. Well, no, it's not true. Now you have, smartphones that have everything on it. You just have to look it up and find it. And once you start finding it and realize, like, man, brown rice is not healthier for me. It's got cyanide in it. It's white rice. But because of marketing, they say white rice is bad, and you need to eat brown rice. No, it's white rice is better for you, but it's still carbohydrates. It breaks down your body. So once you start, now you have information at your fingertips. So there's no reason
yeah,
why you can't find out, what's beneficial for you. And I tried to make that, simpler for people because, most people are, busy day. They want stuff quickly. So I made it to where you can, buy it on Shopify. You can, Amazon, and it gets shipped to as quick as possible. So I put a team together, between my scientists, my manufacturers, my marketing, my back end IT guys for this company.
That's awesome, Donald. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you too. I appreciate it for the opportunity.